Being addicted to Xanax, as best I can tell, is very similar to being addicted to cigarettes. You wake consumed by anxiety, you take a pill, and there's no rush or euphoric sensation or numbness. You just feel normal. Then, as the hours click along, you begin to get more and more and more anxious until eventually you break and take another pill and suddenly feel normal again. Getting unaddicted to Xanax, also like cigarettes, is a complete nightmare. I know because this is exactly what I was doing as I created my new album, from which you're going to hear the first song today. Every other month, I would half my dosage of Xanax. My jaw would get tight, and my thoughts would dodge around my head like a rowdy group of 5-year-olds roughhousing in a padded room. For a couple of days, my muscles would feel like they were expanding, and I'd wake in the middle of the night and not be able to go back to sleep. Those first days on Xanax, though, 5 years earlier, those were a great time. I remember waking on a couch in a wet bathing suit in Pensacola, Florida. We had played a house party the night before. The hosts of the party were gracious enough to let us crash in their living room after taking us to a hot tub you could easily sneak into at 2 a.m. From where I woke on the couch, I could see that our equipment was still set up in the corner of the living room and my guitar amp had been left on through the night. I stood up, adjusted my wet bathing suit, and walked out to our van where I had a box of cereal and my prescription bottle of Xanax. I swallowed a pill and sat on the front porch and genuinely questioned why everyone in the world wasn't taking Xanax every day. Tour now seems so easy. When Tommy, the drummer of the band, woke up, I asked him the same question and offered him a pill. He shrugged and swallowed it. We sat on the porch together, soaking up the sun and wondering how long it would take us to drive to New Orleans that afternoon. Tour is stressful. I've never been in a band that had outside help with driving or could afford to get a motel room more than once or twice per tour. It's mostly crashing on friends' floors and driving with one eye closed, which I'm convinced gives you 15 minutes of rest per every hour of driving. The nights are late and the hangovers are real and the privacy is zero. And, of course, I've spent most of my touring life without Xanax. Before Xanax, the one thing that calmed me down was food, so I always kept piles of food around me in the van. "Fletcher's got a sandwich under his seat" was the phrase my bandmates used to make fun of me, but it was absolutely true. My favorite thing to do was go to a Subway sandwich shop in the afternoon and get 2-foot-long sandwiches, one to eat now and one that I'd keep under my seat in case I had a nervous breakdown. If the stress got too high before I was able to eat that sandwich, though, my stomach would tie into knots and it would be impossible for me to get the first bite down without wanting to throw up. As a result, I would take a bite and chew and chew and chew until eventually my bandmates would yell, "It's been 15 minutes, will you swallow that bite already?" My only fix at this point would be to drink a beer and hope that it would loosen me up enough to get through the rest of my veggie delight. This may seem odd to you hearing this now, knowing what you know, but through most of my years of touring, I didn't even know I had a problem with anxiety. I thought that sometimes it was just difficult for me to eat, and that was a normal thing for some people, and I happen to be one of those people. Of course, there were other physical manifestations of the stress that I didn't recognize as well, and the stress brought on more stress when I was fearing those stomach problems. The whole thing was a snake eating its own tail kind of show. It all came to a head at the end of a particularly stressful King Tuff tour that I was playing guitar on. The last tour before King Tuff moved out to Los Angeles and took up with a new backing band. We had gone through a whole ordeal getting a sick member of the band back to New York after South by Southwest, and upon arriving in Brooklyn, I suddenly found myself unable to get out of the fetal position without massive stomach pain. I went to a clinic and they did some tests and sent me home. When I woke the next day, the pain had increased significantly and there was no way for me to find comfort. I was raced back to the clinic, convinced I had stomach cancer or worse. The nurses got me in a room and administered additional tests, and we waited a couple of hours for the results. When the doctor finally came to see me, she entered the room quietly and walked a cautious, silent circle around my bed. I was still laying on my side, curled in a ball. The doctor rolled a chair to my high bedside and sat down so our heads were near the same level. She looked me in the eye and told me she thought I was very, very stressed out. I immediately agreed, but she shook her head. "No," she said, "I don't think there's anything physically wrong with you. I think you're just very, very stressed out." I thought that was the most ignorant thing I'd ever heard, but of course, she was right. Somehow I ended up in front of a bad psychiatrist who prescribed me endless bottles of Xanax. And just like that, I was back on tour, bathing suit on, chugging down the road towards Florida. There's a reason why it's called a gut feeling. When you do something questionable, the discomfort in your stomach is the first indicator that it might not be such a good idea. My gut tells me not to go on tour, but I do it anyway. That's what the song Shining Light is all about. A relentless, foolish, unquestionable need to play music. Musicians run themselves ragged for almost no money. I've been in the houses of musicians I look up to, friends in bands that are much more successful than my own, and I've seen the absolute squalor they are still living in. I remember seeing the wonderful New York band the So-So Glows at their big return home from tour show a couple years back, just before Christmas. After the gig, the singer, Alex, walked from friend to friend, asking if they had a place he could crash because the heat in his apartment had been turned off while he was gone. He had been away from home for 2 months, and now he didn't have a comfortable place to return to. From everything I've seen, this is the nuts and bolts of being a musician, at least in the circle I travel in. It's the choice you have to make, and I've made a decision. I'm gonna play music, even if it kills me. You've been listening to Fletcher C. Johnson. While this song, Shining Light, is now available to be streamed and purchased, the next 4 episodes of the podcast will feature songs that you can only hear in the podcast episodes themselves, at least until the release of my new album in October, so I hope you check out those upcoming episodes. Next week's podcast takes us in a totally different direction. I'll be talking about some of my songwriting techniques, frustrations, and failures. You can hear a couple of songs get broken down to their individual parts, which is something I'm always excited about. It will basically be like that audio of David Lee Roth's solo voice singing Running with the Devil.
Ooh, yeah.
Listening to Fletcher C. Johnson was written by me and produced by myself and James Ellis over at Public Announcement.
Oh God, I'm running. Ah!
Follow me on Instagram to find out about upcoming shows.
Yeah.
I've got a tour coming up that might be bringing me to your neighborhood. Thanks for listening.
Ah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. Woo!